This is 93.5 CHMR FM.
Sunset Flip Show presents, in association with the And I Quote Facebook page, Ring Rust on 93.5 CHMR FM.
Save a horse, ride a cowboy.
And just like that, a couple of guys who are unprepared are on the air. So, this is Fanboy Mark Brody, and pardon me while I turn the correct microphone on.
Chris Bookman over here, as always, sitting across, ready to talk wrestling. One of my favorite things to do, as always.
What a coincidence, it's a wrestling show.
Well, yeah, that worked out pretty well, didn't it?
Yeah.
So we had an interesting week. Raw 1001 happened.
Yeah.
The first 3-hour endeavor since the 1000th Raw, starting to see if there's any issues with that. There were a couple issues on Raw. I don't know if you heard about, they kept plugging about the fire that happened before these shows started, and they kept, they were being really transparent about that, letting everybody know. I guess they figured the dirt sheets would get a hold of it pretty quick, so it makes more sense to say, hey, you know what, we had a fire, it's all good, we fixed it, here's a bunch of footage of it, world keeps spinning, you know?
Still, once probably would have been fine.
Probably, yeah. I mean, that's the 3 hours, though. Maybe they literally have so little to fill the 3 hours with, or they have so few ideas that they need to air. I mean, they aired the Triple H Brock Lesnar video package twice, didn't they?
I think so.
Yeah, and then they showed the fire. They showed the video footage of like a firecracker, like with a part burnt off of it. They showed that, I think, 3 times. So maybe that speaks to Raw being they don't have enough stuff to fill those.
Really?
Which doesn't make sense to me. I think they got a ton of good stuff that they just got to pull the trigger on. Like, bring them up, bring some guys up, give us some more guys on TV for a bit longer, you know? Give us longer matches, give us more promos backstage, interviews, and instead we're getting Triple H versus Brock Lesnar radio packages and all this stuff, and it doesn't make sense to me. I don't think they're maximizing those minutes.
Or maybe WWE heard the fans wanted more wrestling and decided to give them more Raw.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I would equate the two, more wrestling and more Raw, because there's been Raws where there has been, I mean, you've seen them.
Yeah.
Little to no wrestling at all. I mean, the 1000th Raw barely had any wrestling.
Yeah.
Really had one good match, and that was it. The Raw 1001, I mean, obviously the big story coming into it was, you know, what's Punk going to say, right? Last week we see him turn heel, essentially. I mean, I don't know if he... Because, again, turning heel is, you know, is everybody's saying that. Like, it's not Vince coming out and saying, Punk turned heel. Just so you know, like so he's not necessarily heel. He's done a heel action, right?
Yeah.
And so now we get to see if he's going to carry that forward still as a face. Are fans going to still cheer him? It's a tricky thing because a lot of people probably don't want to boot CM Punk because everyone knows, regardless of his situation, he's probably going to be good. And if anything, he's probably going to be better as a heel because he consistently in his career has been better as a heel. Looking back, you know, when he was just the face guy winning Money in the Bank, people were, you know, they were a fan. It was big when he beat Edge. People were happy to see that, but you know, he started to really make interesting and new TV in Straight Edge Society, right? And then into his run with the new Nexus, and then into obviously last summer, right? So I mean, I think he's back to his element, and we really got to see where he's going forward. I mean, it's smart to antagonize The Rock because The Rock is always going to draw cheers, regardless of where they're at. Addressing him directly was cool. Sitting down at the table was cool. You know, it was a well thought out opening, I think, and I think it did a good job of hitting the right points. You know, if I'm CM Punk. And I said this yesterday on my show, The Danger Zone, 11 o'clock p.m., CHMR FM on Thursdays. If I'm Punk and I'm the guy who's held this title for 8 months and has made clear in those 8 months that all I care about is being the champion and winning and making this title mean as much as it possibly can, and then a guy like The Rock comes in, and Punk has been very vocal about the fact that Rock is a part-timer who sort of swept his way into WrestleMania, stole the main event from a guy like him who is a harder worker, goes out there every night at the house shows, risks himself every night having, you know, a 20-minute match to entertain the fans. So if I am CM Punk, I'm going to say that. I'm going to go out and say, hey, you know what, Rock, this is not right. You don't deserve, you know, a WWE Championship match. You don't deserve to come out and interrupt me at the 1000th Raw. I'm the champion, and say all of a sudden I'm gunning for you. If you are going to say that, I'm going to come after you, right? It's logical, which is I think one of the most important things in wrestling storylines is logic. I think that's what is the glue that holds a good storyline together. It needs to make sense to the viewer. And CM Punk is a guy who we know, if Rock says I'm coming after you, Punk goes and gets him first. And that's what we saw. And I think it was explained well. The downside, of course, is that people cheered him, right? People still buy into CM Punk. So there's more work to do, and I think the next step is going to be SummerSlam. I think however the main event of SummerSlam plays out, I think we're going to leave. I think, first of all, Punk's going to keep the title, and I think we're going to leave with a more understanding of CM Punk as a heel now, and as a new heel, not just, old Punk heel, new Punk heel. I think that's important.
So there's going to be some differentiation between what he did before and now, or is he just going to...
I mean, I don't know if it's something as simple as him attacking Cena. I don't know if they bring another talent into the angle and kind of align them with Punk. I think that's probably a smart way to go, to grab a heel and put him with Punk, maybe someone we haven't seen before, and say, hey, now Punk's got this guy helping him out, or maybe a couple guys. I think that's a good thing. I think, first of all, groupings work. I think historically they've worked for Punk. He's good as a leader. He's got that, infectious personality that draws people to him just as a talent. And on screen, we see that, coming through Straight Edge Society, New Nexus, blah, 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 right? So I think it works, and I think it has worked in the past, and I think it's not necessarily obvious or predictable for them to go back to that. I think it's logical. Again, I think it makes sense. If you're going up against Rock and Cena and Big Show even, bring in a couple extra hands. I think it makes sense.
Yeah. So who would you see joining CM Punk?
Dean Ambrose would be probably top of my list right now as far as potentials. I think that's a good way to segue him into a main eventer type pitcher. Him and Punk,
or at least mid-card anyway.
Mid-card, well, yeah, certainly getting exposure, right? Yeah. Maybe wrestling mid-card guys, but then but being featured at a main event level in terms of who he's working with. Because a lot of the time it's not necessarily about how much they say, but just being able to get in there and have cut a promo against Cena or cut a promo with Punk, even if it's only for a few minutes, even if they don't say anything, they're going to get valuable information just from working these programs, from interacting with these top stars and learning tricks of the trade, the trick to being that top guy. So he would be the top pick. I don't really know who I would go after that. I think they would either have to pull somebody out of the main. I mean, if you look at the main roster right now, most of the heels are pretty tied up. I mean, can't really think of much. I mean, Heath Slater maybe. He's got nothing to do right now, or they seem to be sort of on the fence with what to do with him now. As far as other talent coming up from FCW or up from NXT, I mean, if we're just going to name names, Leo Kruger, what other heels? They got Chris Hero. If we're looking at guys who have independent experience, certainly Punk knows Chris Hero.
Yeah.
So maybe some of these guys, independent talent, guys who we recognize from the indies, and they can side with Punk, and because Punk's an indie guy or born and raised. So
yeah,
that's what I see potentially happening. I think that's a good way for it to go. But either way, I think at SummerSlam we're going to see the next step of the Punk being a heel situation, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, could be interesting to see Wade Barrett maybe squeezed into that.
Yeah,
looks like he's on his way back now from his injury.
Yeah, he didn't even pop into my mind, but yeah, Wade Barrett, and we've seen now photos released of him. He's got a beard now, and whether or not he returns with the beard is hard to say. Whether or not he returns as a heel is hard to say. I mean, does Wade Barrett come back as a face? Is he going to draw a babyface pop simply by returning? Or do people still associate Wade? Because he's a newer, Wade Barrett's a newer character.
Yeah.
He only started wrestling about 2 years ago. Pretty much exactly 2 years ago was when the Nexus angle kind of broke out. And then from there on, he was pretty strongly classified as a heel, sort of mid to mid-card-ish stuff. And then he was right on the, he was about to win Money in the Bank, hadn't really been doing anything, and he got his arm broken, and out for 8 months, right? But presumably they're just gonna pop him back in there somewhere important. I wouldn't actually be surprised if we see him go to SmackDown. I think SmackDown right now is just lacking star power a bit more. They've pulled Cena and Punk now from the SmackDown house shows now that Orton's back. I guess they perceive Orton as a big enough draw to handle that himself. So Wade Barrett would be another guy to insert kind of in, because right now, what's the World Heavyweight Championship picture right now? Sheamus versus Del Rio.
Yeah.
And it's been that for a little bit, and Ziggler kind of floating around with the briefcase. Whether or not he's going to cash in that on Sheamus or on the next guy in line, I'd say they're probably going to wait a little bit. I think that's a smart move. I like to have the briefcase floating out because it adds an excitement to the end of every pay-per-view or the end of every World Championship match where you think, oh, is this going to be the time,
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see Barrett emerge as a challenger for Sheamus now after Del Rio probably loses at SummerSlam. I think that would be just a nice, easy way to segue him back in. Maybe have him return. Maybe have like a number one contenders battle royale, and Wade Barrett's the last entrant or something. His return is booked that way, and he comes in and wins with some heel tactic, and he's right back on the bus. I could see that. Or maybe they pair him up with Punk and they do something crazy over on Raw. I think either way would really work, and I think most importantly, Wade Barrett is talented enough to make either work. I mean, he's great on the mic, great in the ring, has all the tools you need. And I think it's just a matter of time before we see him really another guy just really going to help out the future of the company, I think, is Wade Barrett.
That could all work. A couple of offensive things happened on
controversial week.
Yes.
To say the least. We have AEW showing the potential pitfalls of having a live mic for the entire segment. Although I think that's somewhat, and I read this also, that they still feel like the gimmick of AEW and the players very much so hinges on him being mic'd up and saying his little blurbs, right? Because I think the Primetime Playa act with AEW there is quite entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
I find them a lot of fun. I think it's funny to hear him just say, I'm the best manager in the business, and then it's just like, get up, Titus. That's all he's saying. Just simple little things, not really helping at all, just mostly talking. But he's a good talker. He's a fast talker. He's got that sort of vibe that really works, I think, with a team like the Primetime Players. And I think, moving forward, I think they're the obvious choices to win the titles next. I think it's pretty much guaranteed they're going to be the next team to win the championships. I think they need to keep that live mic situation going on, right? And we'll talk about exactly what happened. So AEW there was a match between Titus O'Neil and Kofi Kingston. It's a singles match with obviously the teams in their corners, typical sort of tag team build-up match that you get to see. And AEW said at one point that Titus O'Neil was unstoppable like Kobe Bryant in a Colorado hotel room. And I didn't get the reference at first. I actually had to see why it was offensive.
Yeah.
And honestly, when I read what the reference was, I laughed. I thought it was really funny that he said that. I thought it was, it was a well-executed little thing to say. What did you think? Do you think it crossed the line? Do you think that it was unnecessary, or do you think that WWE overreacted? Because they issued an apology right away the next day. It was, apologizes for AEW's comments, and they said appropriate action, quote unquote, had been taken. So, do you think that's an overreaction at all?
Well, nowadays, that's what everybody's about. Nobody wants to offend anybody, and everyone takes offense at pretty much everything.
And it's so easy to get anything out now with the internet and with just social media and with people looking for controversy to publish it, stuff like TMZ, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to let that stuff slip through the cracks, especially on live TV in a publicly traded company, right? And that's obviously their concern, right, is that it's live TV, it's a publicly traded company, but my thought is this. If it was in Colorado, maybe inappropriate, right? If he had explicitly said something, that was very, very clear, but I wouldn't be surprised if most of the people in the audience, most of the kids, didn't get the reference, right?
Yeah.
Or at least the audience they were worried about offending, the PG audience, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't get the reference at all.
Yeah, well, and then there's parents like, Mommy, what did he mean by that? And then the parent explains it, or the parent shoos them away, or does whatever, so. But
they shouldn't punish the WWE because they don't want to explain, stuff like that to their children. And it's just a simple matter of saying, it just means that he's really strong, right? Something like that, I think it's
like the football team, the Colorado Rockies. He's really strong.
Yeah. That's right, yeah. It's an easy, just gloss it over, right? But I think that, in the hustle and bustle of a wrestling match where you got, guys running around, there's theme music, I think that AEW is saying one thing. I think if they just let it go, swept it under the rug, I don't think anybody would have noticed or taken issue. And if they had, then they could have issued an apology.
Yeah.
But I think they jumped too quickly to the hypersensitive, we're in trouble because he said this situation.
It's always easier to apologize than ask permission.
That's right. And then there was that actually made another sports show. I'm not sure, I didn't watch it, but that made news outside of WWE, the AEW comment.
Yeah.
Which might be good for him in the long run. Media exposure is a good thing for a lot of these talent in any sort of form, right? Any press is good press, they say.
Yeah.
I think in wrestling that's true because a lot of people already prejudge the business as, brutish and insensitive, right? So I'm not too worried about it. But of course, I also would rather them just be PG-13 again. So, I'm just supporting my own point of view.
And AW himself actually tweeted an apology
he
for
did,
it as well.
I'm sure he was made to do that. But he took it well. And from what I understand, they understand, the issues of live TV. And I like that they're kind of taking it in stride with him. He hasn't been pulled off TV. He was on SmackDown, from what I hear. I'm not sure if he was mic'd. I haven't watched SmackDown yet. I plan to watch it shortly, probably.
Yeah.
At some point today. But
it's not officially on until tonight.
Well, it's on YouTube in the morning,
yeah,
the full version. Yeah, if you know where to look,
you
can dig up that early morning SmackDown from Australia or wherever it airs the night of.